Hi, my name is Marija Bekafigo. On behalf of my co-authors, Diana Cohen, Jason Gainous, and Kevin Wagner, I'll be presenting our research today, State Parties 2.0, Facebook, Campaigns, and Elections. We know that the internet is becoming a primary forum for social and political interaction. Large numbers of Americans are using social networking sites, with Facebook, of course, being the most notable. But people aren't just using these sites to socialize. We know that they have been repurposed essentially for political discourse. This has happened in just a few short years. The American political system is awash in social media from candidates, interest groups, parties, and even the voters themselves. We know that members of Congress are using Twitter and have Facebook pages where they connect with their constituents. And we also know that the president and other presidential candidates have also used Facebook and Twitter to connect with voters. Scholars have argued that social media and the internet have become an essential part of having an effective campaign. We have seen this on the national stage. We've seen candidates and parties at the national stage and research done at the national level on these issues, but we haven't examined this yet at the state level. And that is where our research picks up. We're going to examine the intersection between Facebook and the 50 United States parties and try to determine what role they play in legislative elections. Our first research question is simply, are state parties utilizing these social media such as Facebook as a campaigning tool? And our second research question asks, does the use of Facebook result in electoral success? And I'll define what we mean by electoral success in a minute. We provide evidence that state parties, so our results show that state parties' level of activity on Facebook, party expenditures, and Republican Party organizations all had a positive influence on the growth of Facebook fans or followers in the 2010 state elections. Our results also indicate that these efforts complemented the state party's larger effort to gain seats in their respective state legislatures, but this was primarily for Democrats. We did not expect this result, so we offer some theoretical speculation to account for this inherent paradox. We suggest that the pre-existing advantage that Republicans have had in the organization and financing of state parties, combined with the effectiveness of the traditional campaign strategies for Republicans in 2010 account for this paradoxical result. Now I will examine some of the most recent literature on these issues. Scholars have theorized that political parties primarily perform service functions associated with the aid of electing and re-electing political actors. State party organizations help candidates by providing training, polling information, communication facilities, fundraising assistance, and mobilization efforts. The primary activity at the state level, though, does appear to be the state parties' efforts at getting voters out to vote and mobilizing voters for these candidates. One of the more revolutionary aspects of the internet and social networking sites as campaign tools are their ability to reach voters and fundraise in a way that allows non-traditional candidates to compete for public office where they would otherwise be too disadvantaged to compete. The ability of the internet to circumvent otherwise high cost and high labor tasks like mobilization has led some scholars to propose that the internet will provide the means by which people and politicians can level an imbalanced political field which otherwise favors well-resourced candidates and interests. In this view, the internet is a positive, democratizing entity that helps remove the barriers that favor some groups, parties, and individuals in the electorate. This, of course, is called the equalization theory. In opposition to this, some research has suggested that the internet will eventually be captured and harnessed by traditional interests, returning the system to its current imbalance. That is referred to as normalization theory. Some initial work has found support for equalization, but that has mostly been at the national level. We have found no empirical research attempting to apply equalization theory at the state level. Yet, if equalization theory has merit at the national level concerning competition between well-funded party organizations, it should apply with greater application at the state level, where the internet and social networking sites would have an immediate impact on disparities in funding and organization at the state party level. Recall that our research questions are twofold. First, are state parties using Facebook as a campaigning tool? And secondly, does it matter? We create some measures to answer the question as to whether this use of social media is resulting in electoral success. We examined the 50 state Democratic and Republican Party websites to determine if they were linking to Facebook and other social media sites. Facebook was the #1 linked site on the state party websites, so we use that for our analysis. Then we collect number of Facebook fans for each state party at 2 points in time. During the 2010 campaigns. For our analysis, we are going to use a two-stage least squares estimate model, but before I get to that, I'm going to describe our dependent variables at stage 1 and stage 2. First, dependent variable is Facebook fans at T1 and T2. These are going to be modeled separately, and they are the raw numbers divided by 100 for clearer interpretation. So first we document the number of Facebook fans for each party at T1 and T2, and then this becomes a function of the number of Facebook posts at T1 on that particular profile. We assume that an early push would generate momentum because there would be more opportunity for Facebook friends of those who are fans of the page to be exposed to this. We use this to answer our first research question of whether these state parties are using these sites and gaining fans by their use of these sites. Our second, so in the second stage, our dependent variable, to answer the second question, whether it matters, essentially, is partisan net gain in legislative seats. And you can see that it is calculated by the House seats held by each respective party at T2 plus the Senate seats held by that party at T2 minus the House seats held by the respective party at T1 plus the Senate seats held by their respective party at T1. Next, these data were supplemented with party expenditures data from the Federal Election Commission, state population data from the U.S. Census, and state party website web presence data from Google PageRank. This is a measure of internet penetration. Again, we use a two-stage least squares estimation. I describe our reason for using this approach on page 9 of our paper. We believe we might have an endogeneity problem, and that is discussed in greater length on that page. So our first stage, we regress Facebook fan growth on state population, Facebook posts at T1, and the page rank of the respective state party website. We then use those predicted values in the second stage of the estimation. So partisan net gain is modeled as a function of the instrumented Facebook fan growth indicator, party expenditures, and House and Senate size to control for an opportunity for larger raw change. Our results show, first descriptively, that Republican state parties not only have more fans, had more fans from the beginning at T1, but they also grew their fan base at a more pronounced rate than the Democratic parties. That is shown in Table 1 of our paper, which was too large to put on this presentation. But this result, the idea that state parties have more Facebook fans, they seem to be doing more on Facebook, utilizing it more, connecting with more voters there, does hold up in a variant setting. These estimates are presented in Table 2, and they suggest that the Republican state parties are likely to have more Facebook fans than Democratic state parties, even when controlling for the number of posts on their page, how much money their party spent, state population, and the Google page rank of their state party website that is linked to their Facebook page. Republican parties result in a 15.62 increase in Facebook fans at T1 and 18.33 increase in fans at T2. Recalling that the number of Facebook fans is collapsed for greater clarity, each unit change in the dependent variable represents an increase of 100 Facebook fans. That being said, the number of posts on a profile page are clearly positively related to the number of fans. For every additional post on the respective profiles, there was a 0.48 increase in the number of fans at T1 and 0.54 increase at T2. So what? How might this be magnified? First, the posts originating from the party will generate broad interest as they are widely distributed on Facebook. Second, posts from fans will show up on their own profiles and attract interest from their friends. Thus, the likelihood of generating fans is increased in multiple ways. it's important to note here that we are not suggesting that the number of fans generated will be sufficient to sway the outcome of an election. We are simply asserting that the number of fans generated can serve as a proxy for how well the overall internet campaign is doing, at least when it comes to the social networking aspect of the campaign. Party expenditures was also significant in our model, showing that there's a positive relationship between campaign expenditures and the number of Facebook fans. The other control variables in the model were not statistically significant. The final set of models tests whether the growth of the Facebook fan base is positively correlated to the partisan net gain in seats across both legislative chambers in the 2010 election cycle. We are not presuming a direct causal link between social networking, site use, and the result, but rather an association between the variables. More directly, we are not ready to assert that a successful state party campaign conducted through a social networking site like Facebook results in electoral success. Rather, we are arguing that the number of Facebook fans, again, serves as a good proxy for the success of a party in general at both waging an internet campaign and a traditional popular campaign. So table 3 shows the two-stage estimating procedure. We estimated separate models for Democrats and Republicans. The results were surprising, especially in light of the Republican advantage in number of social networking site users. There's a modest relationship between Facebook fan growth and the net gain in seats for Democrats, but not for Republicans. The results indicate that for every 200 fans grown in the period from T1 to T2, Democrats gained 1 seat. Yet the relationship between social networking site use and electoral success in the Republican model is insignificant, despite the Republican success in building online communities through Facebook, as we previously showed. The fact that social networking site use was positive and significant for Democrats has some interesting implications. And the Democrats may have lacked the momentum and state party organization advantage, but the power and reach of the internet and social networking sites became significant in producing results. This outcome is consistent with the expectation of the equalization theory, which posits that the internet can help level the electoral playing field by providing a low-cost campaign avenue for persons or groups who lack the ability to harness traditional campaigning methods successfully. So social networking, we argue, becomes an important tool, especially when a party might be struggling for every vote. In conclusion, we have shown that state parties are using the internet and social media, Facebook in particular, as a campaigning tool. Yet our results are paradoxical. That is, Republicans are shown to have an edge in the adoption and utilization of Facebook, yet electoral advantage benefited Democrats. We think we should look at the larger political context to explain this paradox. At the time the data were collected, the economy was struggling, the United States was in the midst of healthcare reform, and these factors played in the role of the 2010 election, which helped lead the Republican Party to historic gains at all levels of government. The economy and unemployment had improved very little since 2008. Perhaps more damaging was voters saw the 2009 stimulus bill and that only one House Republican supported as helping Wall Street more than Main Street. And moreover, despite the historic nature of healthcare reform, many voters perceive the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, popularly known as Obamacare, unfavorably. Its passage contributed, we believe, to the sweeping Republican gains in every conceivable level of government. Collectively, these factors may have led to greater interest in the Republican Party, thus inflating measurements of Facebook fans. So we believe that this context explains our paradoxical results. The results did indicate that an increased Facebook fan was associated with a net gain in seats for Democrats, but not Republicans. We believe this is a reflection of the overwhelming popularity of Republicans across the nation in 2010. They did not need the extra attention that would be provided from state party social networking. On the other hand, Democrats were fighting for every vote while being outmatched by the Republicans in traditional campaign strategies. The use of social media provides a new, if still small, arena that can counter, to some degree resource advantages, as shown with the equalization theory. Naturally, we should see if this trend holds up in subsequent data or if it's simply an artifact of the 2010 election. If we looked across elections, we would be able to provide a more definitive answer regarding the effectiveness of state party social media campaigns. For now, we believe this study shows that state parties are jumping on the social media bandwagon, and for good reason. Again, I am Marija Bekafigo. On behalf of my co-authors, Diana Cohen, Jason Gainous, and Kevin Wagner, we thank you for your time and the opportunity to virtually present our research to you today.